Hi, everyone. Today we have a super guest, someone that can shed some light on how Next will implement micro-frontends as a next feature. Today we have a person that is working for Vercel, and he worked previously for 11 years in Google, 2.5 years work as CTO of Vercel. So we have Malte Ubl. Hi, Malte. How are you?
Very good. It's very early here in California, but I'm excited about this.
Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm sure the community will be super pleased to hear more about Vercel, Next, micro-frontends, what the future holds about that. I give a very brief introduction about yourself. If you can tell us a bit more about who you are, what you do, etc., would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned I was at Google for 11 years, and the first kind of 5 years of my career there, I worked in very specifically front-end infrastructure. And obviously that kind of draws the line to my role today at Vercel, but it's actually very, very relevant what I did there for this podcast. My probably biggest achievement in hindsight is I created Wiz, which is the front-end framework that basically all consumer product that Google has made over the last 15 years or so are built on. And much of the older ones also have been backported. So search, Gmail, like basically everything. And recently, it was actually announced that this framework Wiz is merging with Angular. So it's kind of out in the public. It was entirely closed source until very, very recently. And the other thing that
Nice.
team did is it was the team that built the microservice architecture for Google. And I would then move on and build the micro-frontend infrastructure for Google in this time frame, maybe 2012, 13, 14-ish, and which is now very widely deployed. And you can imagine that google.com is like this immense domain that has so many, many different applications on it. And then you have these like vertical things, horizontal things, like there's what's called the one Google bar, which is the thing on top, right? Like, because there's this, unified application navigation that spans all these apps. So I've been like solving this problem for quite a while and excited to get a chance now at Vercel, where it's kind of, in a way, I'm trying to do a similar job. It's just that my customers are not purely internal; they're the entire internet.
That's amazing. I mean, a lot of experience. So for sure, this interview will be super interesting for everyone. So what's your point of view about micro-frontends? As you said, it's been a while that you're working with them. So what do you think about them? Do you think that are really helpful for companies nowadays, especially large organizations or mid-sized organizations?
Yeah, so there's one principle for me in software engineering, which I based on a quote from Eric Schmidt, at the time CEO of Google, who would always say revenue solves all known problems. And I don't think that's true. Certainly not true for Google today. Revenue doesn't solve their antitrust problems, but iteration velocity solves all known software problems. Like because as a professional, you realize you cannot know the future, but you can, the professional thing then to do is to say, okay, but I can react to what I'm learning over time. And so I have to iterate quickly. And I think there is just a scale of software engineering that you arrive at some point, certainly not everyone's in there, where having coarse-grained splitting of applications, broadly speaking, is just something that's almost impossible to avoid. And so that's why I kind of want to embrace this notion of micro-frontend. Um, it's it's kind of the embracing of kind of team independence, and it comes with trade-offs. But like the thing that I am excited about as a framework designer in the end is that like trade-offs are great, right? Like and especially elimination of trade-offs is amazing. Like if you can see, okay, you introduce complexity, but you're gaining velocity. Can we somehow manage the complexity in a way that just feels less burdensome over time?
Yeah, totally. We there is Neil Ford that is used to say that usually we need to pick the least worst trade-off for our design. So I'm fully on board with what you think. So okay, so you are completely on board. It seems on in certain occasion, obviously, to use micro-frontends. So what's the vision for Vercel, and why now starting to look into micro-frontends? There is something compelling that happened during the journey of building Next and growing as a company that basically triggers you to look into this topic?
Yeah, I think there were a few events. One, because you already mentioned also the size of the company, like one of the very, very core principles of Vercel is that we use all the stuff that we're giving to people. Like Vercel itself is a Next.js application. We actually nightly merge the Next.js Canary version into Vercel and run it in production. And basically the test suite that we run on that is essentially part of the Next.js release cycle. And so we try to keep those like dogfooding principles really, really deeply ingrained. And it's certainly the case that Vercel itself as a company, we're now, well north of 150 engineers. Kind of go to a scale where you need to start thinking about scalability points. And so I think we, like what I like to call this empathy on easy mode, where you like don't need to have empathy because it's just your problem. Like you already have the problem. And so we need to now, face some of these things. And that means we are now ideally positioned in solving some of those problems for our customers because we experience them ourselves. You can also do it without that, but like it's not quite the same. And actually, so as of Tuesday, recording on Thursday, August 29th. So as of earlier this week, we're running with Vercel.com as a micro-frontend architecture. So we just finished initial migration and using this kind of as a way to grind through all the problems in our platform that we might be okay with as kind of ourselves, but where we would say, okay, for our customers, we would like them to have a way better experience, and so we use that internal experience to kind of create the perfect product based on it.
I really like this thing that you start to have to, let's say, try the practice, understand what kind of challenges you are facing, and then solve them for all your customers. I think is a very smart way to, let's say, deal with new features that are obviously requested
Right.
by customers. I speak with a lot of customers that are using Next.js as well, and I know that very often there are requests on how I can structure micro-frontends with Next and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that you are trying, you put in production, you understand how the things are working, and then you solve the problems for everyone. So it's kind of amazing for me. So the next question I have is, okay, so what's the plan? So how are you thinking to implement micro-frontends with Next?
So the
Obviously, what you can
no,
share
yeah. So
about that.
it's I can certainly share kind of the meta level. Like, so I'm actually, I'm the CTO of Vercel. So I'm thinking about how I implement micro-frontends in the Vercel platform, and then there's Next.js, but also I care about not just Next.js. So I care about every framework out there. Everyone who decides to roll their own should have a great time. And so for me, I'm thinking both about the platform layer and I'm thinking about the framework layer. Because we want to also make Next.js basically the best place for micro-frontends, but I definitely care about both. And there's a bit of a chicken egg problem happening as well. So the first thing that we want to do is that we want to make Vercel have micro-frontends be first class primitive in the platform. Because right now you can, and we just did, absolutely ship micro-frontends systems on Vercel, right? Like no one's stopping you from doing this today. And like lots of our customers do, we did, like it's a very common thing. But it's not like, the platform basically doesn't know that you're doing that. It just kind of, it's loose coupling. There's also reasons why that's maybe a good idea, right? But it's then you can learn from that initial kind of putting the Lego pieces together version of it and say, okay, now we can productize this to be something. And like the very, very basic version of this is that our platform will understand that what we call projects, which are pre-micro-frontends are websites, but post-micro-frontends are like things that can be composed, that they have a relationship between each other, right? And there's hosts and remotes, and so a platform will learn that this is the thing, and then going from there, all the other primitives we have in the platform will start working directly together with them. So I'll give you an example. One of the kind of benefits of Vercel is that whenever you push to a branch, we make you a preview deployment. Now, let's say you have like a single domain hosting multiple apps within it. Ideally, we wouldn't give you this dedicated domain just for your app. I mean, that's also nice. But ideally, we would give you a way to say, hey, load my host app at the same Git commit, but force it to use my pull requests version of the micro-frontend within it. And so this is something that probably everyone who's building a sophisticated CI/CD system for micro-frontends will solve at some point. And our goal is to just make this kind of just work for everyone who's using micro-frontends on Vercel. And there it doesn't matter whether you use like multiple zones or you use module federation, you make something up yourself, or you use RC federation, whatever like you actually use, is always the same principle that there is a host that has some set of remotes. They're really just URLs, and maybe you fetch RC from there, or maybe it's a mounting point that you put into your URL space. Really doesn't matter because it's always the same, and you always need to do the same things where you are able to at runtime override what those URLs are, so that you can do composition at runtime in a way that kind of facilitates high relation velocity processes.
Yeah, it's a common problem I've seen over and over again. The fact that when you create an ephemeral environment, you need to compose maybe with some more stable version of micro-frontends. You are not in charge of your team, and instead you want the latest version of your team. So it's something definitely that is a great point to look at, not only for, as you said, for Next, but in general for the Vercel platform. I think is a very important, and one thing that I believe you are uniquely positioned today to deliver a great platform for micro-frontends is the fact that you potentially rely on the fact that you can own the entire stack, right? So from, okay, I'm developing, I have my CI/CD, all the perks for my CI/CD, all the shift left capabilities for enhancing the feedback loop for developers. So I think is a very compelling story, merging, let's say, this architectural approach with Vercel.
That's right. And by the way, it's somewhat related to your point about like at what team sizes make sense, because the overhead of doing this yourself is very substantial and probably a big factor in the decision, right? But if it just comes out of the box, why wouldn't you use it, right? And even if you like say you have a monolithic app, which has a lot of benefits, but now, I mean, and speaking from experience, we just announced Next.js Conf, right? And that is a microphone, and it's great, right? There's this website, it's 30-second build time, it's very tiny, and that team can like run with high velocity and just be on their own. And that even makes sense for like maybe a somewhat smaller company, but it wouldn't make sense to build like it's a very sophisticated system to support this workflow, right? But if it comes out of the box, then that's a different situation.
I fully agree with you. I think the democratization of micro-frontends is not there yet. There are a lot of things that you need to look at, not only from the technical perspective, like for microservices, there are plenty of tools that has to be built and polished and adapted for different use cases. So I'm glad to hear the approach that you're taking seems like the right direction. So you mentioned zones before. I was wondering when Guillermo announced basically that you were looking into micro-frontends, what would be the position for zone? Is still something that could be interesting for people? It would be sunset. So where we stand with that?
Yeah, I think like to me actually, and I think in your book you call this vertical versus horizontal integration.
Yes.
the zone approach, which really means you have a URL mount point that has an application serving that subgraph of your overall URL space. This is an approach that is very valuable, but it's for a different use case than any approach that is designed to either do horizontal kind of integration of something like a header, which would be ultra horizontal, or maybe something that's more like an app platform where you own like a box on a page, right? Like we I think we use the word micro-frontend for all these things, but they're not like, these approaches are not mutually exclusive. And so actually, absolutely, I think the having multiple zones as a thing makes a lot of sense. And so we actually are continue to embrace this, and we are working on kind of eliminating some of the trade-offs that it brings. So like zones are for very coarse-grained splitting of an application. And sometimes, let's say you're, financial institution, and you have your insurance business and you have your private banking business, and they really have nothing to do with each other. And people also don't go between them. I go to my private banking thing maybe every day, and maybe I might not even have an insurance with that financial institution, but maybe I do, but I go there once a year, if at all, right?
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter that it's a hard navigation between them, because no one ever does the navigation, right? And so that's why it's such a valuable kind of like piece of technology. Like and it's also it's so simple, right? And it doesn't come with complexity trade-offs in terms of like application composition. So I think this is really useful, and we're also investing on the Next.js side in eliminating some of the trade-offs. So I think it's actually really helpful if you have a situation where you have this coarse-grained separation in your app into multiple systems, and so users shouldn't constantly navigate between them, but sometimes they do, right? And then you can make that better. And so I think it's a really good way of handling it, where you have soft navigations within your zone, and then you do utilize the modern prefetching and view transition APIs for these special cases where people transition between zones. And so those new APIs that the browsers have been landing are helpful to eliminate the trade-offs, so that you, again, are in this world where you enjoy the benefit of these like really independent apps that kind of live on the same domain, but you also don't have the trade-offs that the navigation between them isn't quite as snappy as you might envision.
Yeah, I think you're touching a very important point that I always iterate when I speak with people about that. That usually when we think about micro-frontends, we always think that we be trade-off, because you are loading, let's say, multiple micro-frontends based on the let's say user experience. But vast majority of the time, when the user lands in a website, has already clear what they are looking for, and therefore, as you said in your example, I'm not going to go in the insurance website very often. Therefore, if I can offload all the, let's say, JavaScript that I usually shipped with that, it's a big win, because I will have like the part that is more hit by customers that instead is extremely snappy and fast, heavily optimized, and so on.
Exactly.
So it's one thing we need to often remind people, especially when they start with micro-frontends. So I'm curious now. So based on what you said so far, are you thinking to have a micro-frontends approach for client-side rendering and server-side rendering? Are you focusing first on one of the two rendering approaches, or what's the point? Let's say where you're going.
Yeah, like I refuse to live in a world where you make that choice. So certainly for Vercel, everything we would ever do would be server-side rendered on initial navigation and client-side rendered on subsequent kind of client-side transitions, right? Like I don't I don't consider this to be like a world where we have one or the other.
No, I'm asking that because currently I think in the micro-frontends community there are good solutions for the client-side rendering. One thing that we struggle a bit is around the server-side rendering part, mainly because there are a lot of possibilities and approaches that you can take. And even when you're thinking about cloud provider, they have like different tools, similar tools sometimes, but still you are using them in a slightly different way. So it's interesting to understand, let's say, that you don't separate. For you, it's just a rendering approach. It
Right.
doesn't matter if it's
And
happening
it
on the
kind of
server
comes
or the
back to
client.
this also having Vercel as a unified platform where certain things become much easier. But like there are some trends in the technology space that seem completely unrelated to micro-frontends, but are actually very impactful. Not sure this is a point made very often, but Tailwind is a micro-frontend enabler. And the reason is that one of the worst things about integrating apps on the HTML layer, actually doesn't matter it's on the client or the server, is that the CSS has to fit, right? And if some team decides to override the anchor tag font size, it can have like dramatic effects throughout your application, right? And if you use Tailwind, that's just not the case, right? Like because it's effectively like a acceptable way of doing inline styling, where every style is very much located within the scope that it has impact, and so it makes certain things much easier, right? Related to composition of applications.
Totally. I think you raise a very valid point, especially it's a question that I had so many times. How do we handle styles across teams in order to make sure that there are no collision or overrides between micro-frontends? So definitely.
I could envision, by the way, that at some point we ship the solution that Google's system had for this, which can be really there's a principle of software composition where you want to make sure that global state of some nature can be managed in a conflict-free way. And so what happens, and if you compose multiple applications to one, there's many cases where you want to make sure something is either provided exactly once, but definitely not twice. And so it means that, okay, I require something and there is someone giving it to me, and I provide something and no one else is, right? And so Google actually used this to make it possible to have global style overrides, but you would have to announce you did them, and then if you compose it, just a compile time error. And this can be literally extended to all kinds of things, right? Like, so if you want to put something on the global scope, right, you have to announce it, and again, you get an error. And you also there's an automated test that ensures that you are fully complete in your announcements of what you're doing. And so like that's certainly something I find super interesting in bringing this to more places, that these composition problems go from failing randomly to giving you compile time errors and allowing you to kind of deal with it very quickly.
Yeah, it's a great point. I was using this approach using for JavaScript mainly. We're using object seal, object freeze based on the let's say things that I wanted to share but not change from the inside, or enabling people to change from the inside. But it's having a very opinionated way and think about these details definitely will help developers to embrace micro-frontends in a safe manner. That I think is quite important here. So one of the features that probably make so much noise in the recent years of React is React server components.
Yeah.
How do you see them playing with micro-frontends? Do you see that would be, let's say, pivotal? Do you see that will play some role or not at all? I'm curious to understand what you think.
It's almost certainly going to be a game changer. And for that, it's important to understand what React server components are. They're almost not even related to React. Like it's such a big idea, but it's being sold in a very narrow fashion. What React server components are is a way to serialize applications to the wire. And that's mind blowing. So very naively, and we have to talk about client components in a bit, but you can make a server that returns RC, and you can make a client on the server that takes that RC and merges it into its output stream. And now you have two applications that are composed on the server at this RC layer. and they are completely seamlessly composed. And that just wasn't possible before, right? Like you could do it on the HTML layer, but now you would have effectively two applications that where you somehow have to manage their relationship. And so with RC, this boundary goes away. So you basically have application serialization as a primitive, and quite obviously it's very, very related to the micro-frontend topic, right? So I can in this world I can say I have a micro-frontend service. It produces RC, and I have my host, which consumes that RC and just kind of stitches it at the right place into the output layer. So that's the primitive, and I have no doubt that it's going to be a big deal. And I already mentioned that
Absolutely.
client components are like a interesting point here. And I think that's actually where most of the work goes into making this work. But the approach that we are going to are working on and are going to make happen eventually is that your application can also so RC supports having client components in that stream. That's where the magic happens, right? You need them because only client components can have stateful functionality, so they're not optional. And so the work that is really interesting is how to resolve those clients components from the right server. But that's what we've been working on, and it's, I think, very, very promising.
Nice. So as far as I know, when you are implementing RSSC in Next, you're always calling the same endpoint for, let's say, triggering the React server component. But obviously, for obvious reason, I would say, because so far what you ship at the end is a monolith that is, let's say, available inside, let's say, a container, a Lambda, VM, whatever.
Right.
So do you think that in the future you are going to split up this possibility like you described? So I want to have like my container or application shell that's living on the client, and then one portion of the UI is calling his endpoint for receiving a new let's say state with a React server component and update on a specific endpoint that is owned by a single team. Because I'm thinking also the implication with the organization, right? So if I can have, let's say, multiple endpoints that I will be able to use independently from the other teams, I can create my React server component and basically push more information into my application shell, but without coordinating for the deployment with other teams.
Yeah, exactly. So, like from a host point of view, there's going to be a component that basically takes an URL argument, and so you can have a header component, and you say, HTTP internal URL /header is where this comes from, and then from the outside it just feels like this special React component that takes maybe some props for styling or like for controlling what's in the header, but like it's completely resolved by that URL. And you can also, by the way, envision that many of the primitives that people are used to from Next.js working here. So this RC stream is cacheable and can, so for example, be subject to incremental server static site generation, where you don't fetch the header on every request, because that would be possibly slow, and especially on the header it would be very bad, right? Because it's kind of in a very critical path to drawing the page.
Probably.
And so you would do it as you generate the site, but then you can also say, okay, I changed the header and I invalidate the cache, and everything gets regenerated without redeploying, right? So those kind of known primitives that Next.js have should compose like basically perfectly with federation in mind.
Nice. One thing probably we need to highlight that is important, because many people in the micro-frontends community, when you talk about federation, they immediately go into Moj federation. Currently, you are not using Moj federation. Is it correct? So you're building your own solution that will, let's say, will be embedded inside the Next and Vercel ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to highlight is that, as I was saying earlier, the platform support on Vercel is going to be completely agnostic, and it's going to support module federation.
Yeah.
Right. I think the the bringing RC into the mix is probably enough of a reason to kind of have this be a separate thing. And then, but also people can then design more opinionated layers on top. So, almost certainly initially, especially, we will not solve all the problems, right? And so I think there's a lot of room for innovation on the layer between user space and the framework space. In particular, the framework will be initially very focused on providing the primitives that allow people to kind of compose more sophisticated stuff on top.
Yeah, totally. I think is the right approach also because you need to understand where this is going, what are the pain points when people start to use it. Because obviously, as you said, you start to use that internally, and you will see a subset of the challenges, but probably other companies will maybe, let's say, find other challenges that you didn't think about, so they can, let's say, contribute back
Exactly.
and let's say. Share different challenges that you could solve later on. And on the tool side, on the CI/CD side, do you have already, let's say, some ideas on how let's say, the micro-frontends needs will be fulfilled by the Vercel CI/CD and all the other tools that you are providing? I'm thinking also, for instance, the dashboard and monitoring that you provide. Right. Like a team can join in a dashboard and see only the dashboard related to his micro-frontend instead of seeing the entire application, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of thoughts. I think the one of the key parts in this is what people can check out today is we recently added feature flag support to the platform as a first class thing, which I was actually one of my core goals kind of coming to Vercel, that I wanted to make that happen, because I felt that the way people were handling feature flags was weird, to be honest. Like there are all these companies and which are our partners now, like LaunchDarkly and Static, and there's some kind of open feature flag thing, and all of these are very focused on being APIs for feature flags, but they don't tell you how to use them. There's a JSON API, and I have a back of flags, and what do I do, right? It's completely up to me. And what I was used to at Google were feature flags, absolutely everything, literally every line of CSS would be behind a feature flag. And yeah, you want a feature flag, you write a line of code to make one, and then you can use it. I don't have to go to some dashboard and click around and make me one, right? And also now, because it's in code, it's type safe. I can manipulate it like any other symbol, right? And the framework can be aware, and there's other things that are possible. And so what we built on Vercel is that I have a feature flag that I define in code, and I say, okay, this one is backed by LaunchDarkly. There's the container, which is in code, and there's the value, which comes from somewhere, but it doesn't matter. It can come from anywhere. But now we know that this flag exists. And what we shipped on Vercel is that you can go to the page and say, okay, I can overwrite the flags without having to have access to the system that serves my production flags, that does my experimentation, etc. I'm just a developer, and I can actually also do that locally. And then if I push the branch, it says, well, you overrode it locally, you probably also want it here. And then someone comes to the branch and says, okay, it's recommended to turn on this flag for this branch, because really the branch is all about kind of working on this flag. And then you can go to production and you can say, okay, I want my colleague to work with this flag on. And so it generates a link that is digitally signed that allows you to override that flag for this production serving context, which obviously is an unsafe operation in general. So there has to be some digital signatures in place. And that primitive can be directly applied to micro-frontends. Because if you really think about it, the notion of a remote, that's just a special feature flag, because it just maps some kind of name, some identifier for that remote, so some URL that resolves it. And so we kind of put these two things together, and that will kind of give us all the flexibility that we need. And so for now, for example, what you can expect to see is that you deploy your micro-frontend, and today Vercel will comment on your PR and say, here are all the apps that get invalidated by you making that change. And in the future, because now the platform knows how these projects are related, it can say, okay, you are actually composed into this other application. You might not be in the same repository. You might also be in the same repository, but you certainly didn't invalidate their code. Like, they don't need to be redeployed. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Because you're loosely coupled to them. But the system knows that you are related to them, and so it will generate a digitally signed link in that GitHub comment or GitLab, whatever you're using, saying you can now go to hostwebsite.com and use the micro-frontend that you just deployed at this like unsubmitted pull request version if you have this digitally signed URL, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing. And again, like, it doesn't matter whether that's a zone or it's a modular federation thing or it's RC federation, it's always the same idea.
That sounds super exciting, to be honest. After this talk, this chat, I'm very excited about to, let's say, try firsthand all this greatness. So, what's the ETA for seeing the first releases, beta, alpha, whatever is you feel could be possible to see? Do you think that will be first half of next year, earlier than that? So,
yeah, I expect the platform change to just land iteratively over the next 3 to 6 months. As I was saying, we are now in production ourselves, and that was kind of the first milestone, and we're already working on getting kind of the platform features launched. For RC Federation, there is not a hard timeline on it. The current phase we're in is what we call design partnerships. So, and this is also something that I think many platform teams will probably engage in, where you say, okay, here's the deal. I have this technology and it doesn't work yet, but I'm very sure it's the future. Would you like to try it first? Internal team, right? And there's trade-offs that come with it. Good and bad, right? Bad is, well, it doesn't work yet. Also bad is, sure, you only start trying when it kind of works, but there's going to be bugs and there's going to be, bad assumptions and what have you, right? But the good side is that once you, like, first of all, you have influence. So while your platform team might not do whatever you want, they will obviously, like, they are working with you because they want your input. And the other big part is that once you are done, you are kind of one step ahead in terms of technology. And so as a team, you have to be in the right spot, right? If I have this major legacy app, then I might not be in the right position to adopt now, right? But every so often, I might have a new project coming up. It's just the right time for me, right? And so I hop onto this because I was going to do it anyway, and I was going to make a major shift anyway in my technology. And so it's nice to be on the absolute latest, so that, because we are going to be on these, like, I don't know, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 year cycles, and being a top might be something that I value as a team. And so, like, one of the things that we are trying here is that, again, as thinking of Vercel as being kind of a platform team for hire, so to say, that we have a similar relationship with trusted customers, where they get access to this technology early. They give us, exactly like you're saying, Luca, this feedback that we cannot get ourselves because our problems, we're not a major bank, right? Like, we have 150 developers. Like, if you have 1,000 developers, you're going to run into different things. And so, like, we want to have these partnerships and basically iterate together before kind of giving it to absolutely everyone, because it is, as you know, I mean, and it'll be open source, and you can always kind of dig in there and choose your own adventure, right? But it's because this type of technology is very explicitly not for everyone, because at the low end of the scale, it probably actually doesn't help you, right? It probably has negative velocity impact. So because of that setup, which is much more similar to, like, a platform team and their, like, large internal customers, like we're kind of trying to transport a similar way of operating to like our way as a company to operate with our customers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I especially on the point when you're saying, in small companies they won't provide the benefit that are supposed to give, mainly because you need to find the right level of modularization, as I call it, between let's say your context within your context and understanding properly how your teams will apply this modularity. Sometimes code modularity and all the design patterns we have learned over the years are more than enough for shipping with a decent level of flexibility that for many contexts is still a viable solution.
Yeah, if I can keep the whole app in my head, then
yeah,
why should I split it up, right? But
exactly.
you very quickly get to a point where that becomes very unfeasible.
Oh, totally. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I have one last question for you. So, while I was thinking what to ask, considering your experience and everything that you have done in the front end community, not only on the distributed system, if you want, for front end, I was thinking what the community can do in order to influence or to provide feedback to you, Vercel, and Next, in order to go to the direction that we expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I already mentioned the design partnerships.
Yes.
So that's actually an option. But again, like it's a high investment. It needs to be at the right time. It might not be the right time for everyone. But so that is actually an option. And we're on the internet. You can find us. The otherwise, it's going to be everything's going to be open. Like certainly on the Next.js side, everything's going to be open source, right? So at some point there's going to be an RC. At some point there's going to be a canary version of Next.js that has an experimental flag that you can turn on and try it out. And that is going to be very early into the design process, right? Where feedback is still absolutely possible and very much appreciated. So like as an open source project, like the best way to engage there is to become, in some way engage with the open source project and give feedback right away. And it's again, like it's highly appreciated. Like the especially if you make bold choices, like as I was mentioning, we run our canary version in production every day as a way of basically our best way of production hardening Next.js for when it's actually released, right? And like sometimes, like I wouldn't recommend people running experimental Next.js features in production, but also like I would not recommend it. Like sometimes it's the right choice, right? Like if you let's say like because if I'm a professional platform team and I have this project and I know it's going to take me 6 months or a year, and there is this feature that I really want, I'm taking a bit of a bet using it now, but because my thing isn't really actually going to be in production for some time, I think it might be a bet worth taking, right? And and I have to like, okay, maybe there's a breaking change because that's not guaranteed that it's not going to happen, right? And so I have a little bit of pain, but I think if you kind of look at the history of like similar projects, it's not infinite pain, and so it's a trade off again, like I can make, right? Like I don't recommend this to everyone, and if I'm not in the right position as a team to take that bet at that point, then that's not only okay, that's good that I make that call, right? Like I should be making that call, but I can also make the opposite call and say, no, this is the right moment for me to take a bet here and to be able to provide influence so that I'm making sure that when the thing's actually done, it's what I need for my own business.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's all I got. I think it was a tremendous contribution that what you shared, and I think everyone that is going to listen is going to be extremely excited. So thank you very much, Malte, for your time and for what you shared. I think it's very insightful. The fact that he is in, let's say, the micro-frontends in Vercel and Next is definitely in amazing hands. I cannot say good because it shouldn't be.
Hopefully,
it's not enough to describe.
We're very
describe
happy
that.
so far.
So
There actually was some really good performance benefits, which I was positively surprised about.
yeah, I've seen that firsthand as well, especially in low-end devices. So I'm glad that you that comparing notes, we have the same outputs.
Yeah, excellent.
It's great to see that.
This was really fun. I love
So
talking, nerdy platform engineering technology stuff. And as I was saying, we're
yeah,
going to roll this over the next 3 months or so, and I would absolutely appreciate all feedback. I'm, on the internet, I'm very reachable. So if people have feedback and questions, I'm always around.
absolutely. Thank you very much again. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to see you soon in the next episode of Micro Frontends in the Trenches.
Thank you.